Hello, I'm Professor Benavides, and I want to talk about Python in specifics to functions and methods. I'm going to create a little app script, if you will, that will prompt the user for the rectangle's width and length. And then I'm going to go ahead and use functions to compute those. I'm going to put those functions in a separate file called a module, and then I'm going to import that module into my main program so that I can access those particular methods. So since I have to have the methods first before I call them, that's where I'm going to start. So as you realize, Sublime Text can't handle input, so I'm going to go ahead and use Visual Studio Code. And since I'm going to use a couple of folders, I'm probably going to want to create a folder. I could have just done that on the desktop, but let me just go ahead and go, if I go File, New, well, that doesn't let me do that like that. But when I go and save, let's say I go ahead and save, it gives me the little dialog where I can create the folder right there. So I'm going to go to the desktop, create the folder, and I'm just going to call this rectangle. You can call this whatever you want, like you can call it like a lab8 underscore and then your username, but I'm just going to call it this way for my purposes. I'm going to double click on that, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my file in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and call this rectangle underscore mod for module. And then I'm going to save this as a Python file. All right. Seeing how that I'm going to store it in the rectangle folder that's on the desktop. All right. Get rid of this welcome. So now I'm going to go ahead and build this module. And a module is what we call something that contains things that we will use, like functions. So, what is a function? A function is, let's just say it performs an action. It can receive, and it can send back to the place from which it's called. So we create functions to divide and conquer. We're going to create some really simple ones right now. I'm just going to create a function to find the area and another function to find the perimeter of a rectangle. Certainly I could have put this all in one file, but I want to go ahead and show how you can create kind of like a little library of functions. It's kind of like a stepping stone to thinking about classes and objects and things like that. So far, we've been, using a lot of built-in functions on our own. We've never created our own custom-built function. So like some of the built-in functions that you may have used before is the print function, or the int function, or the float function when you're receiving input. What about the length function and the sum function when you're working with lists? So those are pre-built functions. What we want to do now today is build our own functions. And we call them functions when they're not associated with a class, and when they are associated with a class, we call them methods. So I guess technically I should be calling them functions because I'm not going to be associating it. I'm not going to create an object or a class and then put the methods or the functions in that class. So functions, when they're in the context of a class, are referred to as methods. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and build a couple of simple functions, and then I'm going to go ahead and call them in the other file. So let's start off right here with my first one here. And the first line, the header here, starts with the keyword DEF, stands for definition. And then the name of the function. just going to call it find area. Now this particular function is going to receive the width and the length. These are referred to as parameters, or the parameter list. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in a colon, and what that's going to give me is that when I press enter here, it's going to indent properly. That's 4 spaces by default, and that means that I'm pretty much inside of a block of code, right? So many times referred to as a suite. If I didn't type in that colon, not only would I have a syntax error, but my indentation would be off. Okay, so I'm going to do something very simple here. I'm just going to go ahead and say area gets width times length, and then I'm going to go ahead and return area. Okay, pretty easy stuff. Press enter and enter, and then to get out of this little suite here, I got a backspace so that I can go ahead and define my next function. So we'll start off with the EF. We'll call it find perimeter, and this will get width and length as well. Put in the little colon, and we'll do pretty much the same idea. We'll call it perimeter, the variable that we're going to return. Gets 2 times width plus length, and then we'll return perimeter. Okay, pressing enter, and then forgot the docstring. They beginner classes, they always talk about you must enter in docstring for every method, but then they never really show you what to do with it. And later on, you find out that it's used, to document your methods or your classes, and you can print out the docstrings. And basically, what the idea is that for maintenance purposes, you want to document what you've done and how you've done it, so that someone else coming in to maintain your code can understand what you've done. So this is a docstring that I'm going to put in right now. So notice how I pressed enter, right? I got right in front of that colon, and I'm going to put in 3, double quotes, and I'm going to put in, there's a lot of discussion about what you should put in a docstring. I'm just going to put in a real simple one-liner just to comply with the idea that we should have a docstring. Calculate the area of a rectangle, and then close it. If you don't close it, it's just one big old long comment. The true purpose of this triple, double quote is for the docstring. Many people will use it as a multi-line comment, and we're going to do the same thing over here. And I'll just go say calculate perimeter of a rectangle. All right. So now for good luck, I'm going to go ahead and run this. I mean, nothing will happen because there's, it's not being called or anything. I just want to make sure everything is syntactically correct, and that it looks okay. Yeah, so no major problems. So now, this is going to be where I'm going to have my library of methods, if you will. It's in a folder, in a file called rectangle_mod. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file that's going to use these methods. I'm going to use the dot operator to access them. But I'm going to need to import that other file. So let me just go ahead and get that other file going here. And let me go ahead, and before I get going, let me just go ahead and save it. Make sure I save it to the right place. Yeah, I'm in rectangle. And I'm going to go ahead and call this rectangle main. Why not? Main gives me the idea that it's the main program. even though you may not agree with that terminology. So I have rectangle underscore main and rectangle underscore mod. Mod for the module, main for the sort of like the main program, if you would. And let's go ahead and select the type of Python. And verifying that I'm putting it into a folder called rectangle. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import that other file. And neat that I can select it from the list here, right? After I import it, I'm ready to start the logic of my program. So the logic of my program is I'm gonna prompt the user for the width of the rectangle and the length of the rectangle, and then I'm going to go ahead and pass those to the methods in the other file by using the dot operator. I'll show you how that's done, but basically just reference the name of the file or the module, dot, and then the method, and then you pass it the arguments. So let's make sure that we understand the difference between arguments and parameters real fast. Inside, in the header for my method, the parenthesis, this is the parameter list, right? So basically, when we call the method, which we're going to do inside of main, when we call it, we pass arguments. Okay. So parameters are in the definition of the method, and arguments are when we call the method. I'm going to also employ a repetition scheme to ask the user if they want to go ahead and repeat this calculation. All right, so first I'll start off with the name of the program. You know, I always like to start off with the name of the program. Find area and perimeter of rectangle. Doesn't need that space, but I did it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a flag, a Boolean. I'm going to create a Boolean variable, and I'm going to use that in the loop to control repetition. So let's just say repeat gets true. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my loop, and I'll just say while repeat, colon, right? So when I press enter here, I'll be in this block or inside of this suite. So I want to prompt for width, prompt for length, then go ahead and calculate area and calculate perimeter by calling the methods in the other file, in the module. And then I'll show the area, show the perimeter, and then ask if they want to repeat by testing or testing by seeing if they want to repeat. I'll show you. So first thing we want to do is ask for the width. So I'll say width gets, and let's just say input. And let's go down one line and say enter the rectangles width. And of course, so that in case they're wondering, inches. The little colon space, pretty important. Now beginners usually do it this way, and I'll show you a way in which we could do these two lines of code in one line. So with gets, kind of like repetitive, right? It's a little bit maybe too repetitive. Yeah, I'll go and fix that. Enter, misspelled. And then we'll ask for the rectangle's length. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and do those two lines all at once. I'm going to go ahead and use the float method, and I'm going to pass the input method, or the return of what the input method does, to that. Enter rectangles length. And we'll remind them that this is inches. Colon space, right? So let's take a quick look at this. This line on line 10 does what line 8 and 9 does. So basically the internal parenthesis gets done first. The input gets done first. That string is then sent to the float method, and the job of the float method is to go ahead and convert that string to a numeric, a float to be specific. And that ends up being in a variable called length. Okay. Next thing on here is that we're going to go ahead and call the methods in the other file. And I'm going to put it, you don't have to put it in variables, but I like to do with variables. So I'm going to go ahead and call the method that finds the area, and the return, I'm going to put it in a variable called area. So the name of that file is called rectangle mod, right? Right. So you can select it from the drop-down list here. And I'm going to put in a period, and oh, really nice. I can select from the drop-down. I'm going to do area, and then just pass it width and length. Okay. So that ends up landing in area. Let's do the same thing for perimeter. So we'll go rectangle mod, find perimeter. I'm using the down arrow to select, find perimeter, and then pressing tab, open parenthesis, width and length. Press the tab key to get the right variable. All right, so I've called both of those methods now. If I want a little spacing on here to make it look nice, I can, I have my input followed by my call to the methods. So this is a call. A call is when I specify the method name and I pass it. I have to pass it the right number of variables. So they have to match up. They should match up. So if the definition, if the function definition calls for what has one parameter in it, well, I need to pass just one. If the function definition has two, I must pass two. So they should match up, and if they're numbers, they should be, you pass numbers. If they're strings, you pass strings, and they should be that in that order. Right now, we're kind of lucky. Well, actually, you really shouldn't mess. You should send in width first and then length, because if you put in length and then width, your equation might end up putting the numbers in the wrong. You might end up getting screwy numbers if you do that. So you have to be a little bit compulsive. There should be agreement in the sequence on here. There should be agreement in terms of whether they're numbers or strings. So I've got these. I've called these two methods, and I put the return in variables called area and perimeter. So all I got to do now is build my output. And I'm going to use a F string. So I'll say the area is, we'll go down the line, is, and I'm going to use a little placeholder with the curly brackets, go back over here and just say area. I'm going to format this to 2 decimal places. So colon says, hey, I'm going to format this number, and then dot. Well, actually, what am I going to do? I'm going to format it to, let's see, 0. Okay, yeah, let's do it that way. See what that looks like. Okay? And then let's just go ahead and do another one. And then I'm going to go ahead and say the parameter is, right? I use another little placeholder. And typically I don't format until afterwards because I want you to see what it looks like without it. So maybe let me just go ahead and get that off, and then hopefully I won't forget to put it in there, because I like to pretty much get it output without any formatting, so that I can understand why I'm formatting things that way. Okay. Okay, so why are those colored differently. Oh, because I didn't put in the F for F string. Right. Right, for a formatted string. So the feedback is really important in terms of letting you know whether you're doing things right or wrong. So now I'm going to test to see if they want to do it again. So I'll say again, gets input, and we'll ask them. We'll say, would you like to do another calculation? Question mark. And let's kind of like hint that it should be either a Y or an N. That should be a big hint on there, right? So notice how I very important that on these prompts on here, after the colon, I put a space. After the colon, I put a space. Otherwise it's just too close to the prompt. So now I have to perform the test. I'll say if again, in this case, the test for equality is 2 equal signs. If it's equal to n, then what? So it's a single line if, put in the colon, press enter, and it indents me in the correct place. In that case, if they say no, then repeat is set to false. Remember, the Booleans are capital F, capital T for true. Okay. The only thing left to do is to say thank you and goodbye. So when I press enter, it still thinks that I'm in that little suite there. Press enter again and then backspace all the way to the left and then say thanks and goodbye. And I'm doing this not only to say thanks and goodbye, but to make sure that everybody understands this, the concept of the block of code and how it's done with indentation. Indentation is 4 spaces by default. I want to make sure that I'm out of that suite. So I'm going to go ahead and go down one line and say thanks for using this program. Goodbye. And I'm going to put in a \n here because I like a line at the end. So let's see if this works. So just to reiterate what happened here, this is my main program. It's going to use the methods that I have in my little library over here. I've only got 2 of them on here, but it could grow, right? So I got to be inside of main when I run. So I'm going to go ahead and run and see if I have any errors. So let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so I can see. So my program is running. It says enter the rectangle's width. So I'm going to do some simple numbers. 10 and 10. So the area is 100. And the perimeter is 40. You want another. So that, well, how do you think that it would look better? I mean, if you wanted to format the number on here, how many decimal places? I'm at a loss on that. I do want to format it. I guess I could try it different ways, but for right now, I'm going to say no. So it drops out of the loop and the program terminates. So just to play around, we've always done 2 decimal places, for the formatting, so let's try that 0 that I wanted to do on here. So colon dot 0F. So that won't give it any. So, all right. So let's go ahead and run it again. And let's try 15 and 30. And so the perimeter is, and need to see a little bit more. So when you run it again, it keeps the old stuff on here. That confuses some people. If that confuses you, here's my new output. You should just go ahead and delete it and run it again so that it's just that one run. So the area is 450 and the perimeter is 90. Oh, yeah, that looks a little bit better. Yeah. So if you want to repeat, you put in a Y, press enter, and we start again. So I'll just say, 100 and 200. So the area is and the perimeter is. Now you may want to format it with a comma if you're getting really, really big numbers. I don't mean that's a really big 100 inches. I wonder how many feet that is. I guess it's possible, so you may want to go ahead and put in a little comma in there. So I'm going to say no, and I will go ahead and put in the comma just in case. So the comma would go right in front of, just in case, really big inches, really big rectangle, you know what I mean? So we'll put in a little comma on here, even though it's really not the main idea. That ought to get it to go. And let's just run it one more time for good luck. Put in a big number here, 200 by 150. So let's take a look at that on here. Did I get the comma? Yeah, there it is. See, I should have done delete. So the area is 30,000 and the perimeter is 70. Okay, so we'll click on no. All right, goodbye. That's the end of it. What I mean by the delete, if you click on delete on here, it'll get rid of everything so that when you run it, it doesn't show you all the stuff that you have done from before. You start pretty much clean. You don't see all that history that you've done before. So if I enter in, 100 and 100, again, I can see that it's, my output is only that one time. So there we go. So the main idea here is methods. Remember, important ideas here is if you have the methods over here and you don't call them, well, nothing's going to happen. So these method definitions, they start off with the keyword DEF, then they have the method name, and then they have a parameter list. Do they have to have a parameter list? No, but it depends on what you're doing. In this particular case, I set width and length, and I used that in a formula to calculate area. Well, I hope I did this one right for perimeter of a rectangle. I'll have to look that up online. But basically the idea here is that I calculated the perimeter and then I returned it. So where does it return it? It returns it to the place from which it's called. So if I go to main, right here I call the methods on line 12 and 13. Right here I call, and notice when I point to it, well, that's kind of neat. I can see the doc type. See how it says calculate the area of a rectangle. I guess that's kind of neat. I point to the other one on here, calculate the perimeter of a rectangle. Now, if you have really good informative method names, they say what they do, but some people could say, find kitty kitty, and it's really doing area. So they're not really, some people are not really good at giving methods really good names. So the doc type here, yeah, it can be at the very end. You can go ahead and have the doc types printed for documentation. Here I can see that pointing to it is very helpful in this respect, so that when I'm using it, it's giving me some feedback as to what it does. So when I call the method, the return, so the method, the function. So a function, performs an action and returns a value to the place from which it's called. So it goes and does that formula, and it returns a number, and it assigns it. See, this is an assignment statement here on line 12. It assigns it to a variable called area. Now, I could have just said rectangle underscore mod find area, and I could have put that right in here on line 15. But I like to go ahead and do my assignments to a variable and then use the variable in a string. It makes it a little bit neater, I think, when you're coding. Makes it simpler. So the main idea was functions, but I incorporated a lot of other things, such as putting the functions in a little library called a module. And in order to use it, I had to have the import statement up here. And this is very similar to other C-based languages. Like if you've ever worked in, for example, C or C++ or Java. If you're in Java, you use an import statement, in a similar way. C and C++ have that pound include, if I remember, something similar to that. You can test this to make sure if it needs it or not by breaking it. So I can come right in here and let's go ahead and break it. Let's put a, not break it, but put a pound sign right in front of it to comment it out, and let's see what happens. So I still get the prompt, right? Because I haven't gone to the formula. Oh, right away, it's already this editor is already saying, hey, man, I don't know what rectangle underscore mod is. It doesn't see it. So I don't, so I know there's going to be a problem. So I put in a 10 and a 10, and then there's a name error. It's not defined, right? So that's just in case you were wondering, why do I need this little import statement here? So there we go. Bring it back, run it again, and I don't get any of those little squigglies. But I got that little squiggly, which was kind of neat. I didn't even have to run the program to get it. The editor alerted me to that problem. So some editors, I mean, this is one of the better ones, I think. Visual Studio Code. I used to use it a lot for HTML, CSS, and stuff like that. So it's multi-purpose. So that is my little discussion of functions. Remember, the function definition starts with DEF. You've got parameters inside the definition, and when you call the method, you pass what? You pass arguments, and there should be some agreement. Otherwise, you're going to mess things up. So other than that, thank you.